Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and DC Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to have Debbie Bowden in the studio today from the Caroline Review. So welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rebecca. Pleasure to be here.
And you're here for a variety of reasons, but the first reason is that you nominated your publication for our Best Moves category. So MDDC is part of our contest. Each year asks our member publications to submit the best move that they did. This is calendar year 2025 and why it was the best move. So I want to hear all about the Caroline Review, but let's start with what your best move was.
So best move was we put a title together called CarolineReview.news. It's a digital newspaper. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to deliver that as a print on demand. So it's designed as a PDF for people, businesses to just print it from their desktop. So they're easily getting CarolineReview.news every week.
I love that. And so let's put that in context and kind of take a step back. So Caroline County, Maryland is where the Caroline Review lives, breathes, and does its work. And you've been a digital only publication since the inception and still are digital. So this is a little bit of a format change. Tell us about the start of the Caroline Review.
Sure. So Caroline Review is actually two different titles. Caroline Review is a magazine. It's a printed monthly magazine. It's been around since 1980. I purchased it in May of 2024. It is an advertiser supported publication, and it really is that hometown magazine where we still publish public information, deed transfers, building permits, marriage certificates, things that you don't typically see anymore. But the readership, and it's a wide range of people, wide range of demographics, really like that information. So when I bought it in May of 24, there was no original content. It was public. It was press releases. There were some commentators, columnists, etc. But I brought on some freelance reporters to do stories about people, businesses, organization in Caroline County. And so that's what's really fed the magazine itself, the printed publication. And it's still going strong. We have a great distribution where our page numbers have increased, our advertisers have increased. So with that, there was a website that was providing that information of the magazine, like a lot of the local similar type of publications do. But we found that what a little bit of what was missing for our readers was the harder news. I don't want to say hard news. We're not doing the police blotter. We're not doing fire. We don't have the staff to be there with a scanner reporting on a fire.
But we're not breaking news, but
right, not breaking news. But I decided to then start an offshoot, CarolineReview.news, which is digital only outside of that monthly time frame. So it does reporting weekly on the major town governments, the county government, the Board of Education. We're covering the festivities and organization meetings. So we just did a big story about the 4-H banquet, which people love. That's a 3-hour banquet. There are hundreds of people who are involved in that organization. And so we provide that coverage. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do so because it's in between our publication for the printed newspaper. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to provide that weekly news, but I knew that it was cost prohibitive to do printing copies and
Mhm.
distribute it. I
Got it.
looked at that. So I decided to stay digital only.
Mhm.
And so where people can go to the website, we post on Facebook for headlines. That's all we
Mhm.
use our social media for, is to promote the news, not to promote ourselves. I have a weekly free subscription newsletter, and then the print on demand, which I submitted for the best move, really grew out of a reader's request. And I'd like to share that with you if you
Oh,
want me
please.
to.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, Caroline County is one of the, demographically, it's one of the counties that has the most poverty level
Mhm.
in the state of Maryland. It also has an older population, and it has an older population that is living on its own. Meaning that, it's a widow or a widower, family may or may not be around. So a lot of
Mhm.
requirements of independence, and a lot of perhaps not understanding technology or what it takes to have internet capabilities, or they can't afford it.
Mhm.
So I knew that I was going to have that contingency of readers who wanted that weekly news, but had no way of easily getting it through a digital format. And so I just kind of waited. I talked to the library system. I said, "Can we provide this to your patrons?" They said, "Sure." The senior centers, they all provide that information to folks that may not have easily accessible internet service.
Mhm.
But I thought, I'm going to wait until I get someone to ask me about sending them the paper. I'm going to
Sure.
wait to see how long that takes and what form that takes. And sure enough, about 6 months after I started the CarolineReview.news, Miss Lily called and said, "I want the paper. I have internet and I have it on my phone, but it was really hard for me to read. Would you send it to me?" And I said,
Mhm.
"Sure." This was the first one of me building, if there was a case for doing any kind of print on demand.
And this was it's stories on a website at this point. It's not a digital, it's not a printable edition. It
Correct.
was, which does, I mean, honestly, I love to see things sort of laid out because you can scan it more easily. It's just a different way of reading for sure.
Exactly, exactly. And of course, through the website, people could print on
Right.
demand, where they could print the story. So I was printing the story for Miss Lily, and it was cumbersome. And I
Mhm.
talked to the website provider, really nothing more that we could do, and you see that across all titles, all
Yeah.
newspapers,
Right.
magazines,
Like,
etc.
here's 20 pages for your small article because it has
Exactly.
everything around. It's
And
just different. Yeah.
yeah. So, I do pride myself on being a problem solver, and I knew the problem was I was wasting too much of my time for this lady who is lovely, and I loved doing it, but I needed to be more efficient. And I thought, if I'm having this issue, then other people must be having the same problem.
Sure.
So I thought, all right, I do the graphics for the magazine. Why don't I just make it a PDF?
Mhm.
Make it a PDF, a regular PDF size, 8.5 by 11, publish that as the digital newspaper.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I'll go ahead and say that again. Publish
Oh.
that as the digital newspaper. And so that's what I did. And it makes it very easy to print. So I typically have about 18 pages.
Mhm.
Um, so front and back, it's just 9 sheets of paper. And I stick it in an envelope and I send it to Miss Lily. And I've been able to promote that as another way for people to get the weekly newspaper.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great way to keep people connected to the community. And so I wanted before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about your background and you were an economic development director. And so I wanted to better understand sort of why you decided to purchase the magazine and sort of the where you see this news outlet kind of fitting in the community of Caroline County. And for those people who just kind of drive from town to the beach, Caroline
Mm.
County is cinched right up against Delaware. It's deep in the Eastern Shore, but doesn't have your I don't know if you're completely landlocked, but it's not like you're oceanfront, and I feel like there's a river that's close.
Yes.
And so it's a different sort of community than I think a lot of people think of the waterways of the Eastern Shore. So just kind of wanted to understand the opportunity and what you were thinking when you purchased.
Sure. That's a good point. There's definitely a culture in Caroline County that's much more farm-based.
Mhm.
It's much more rural. We don't have any land up against either bay, of course, the Delaware Bay or the Chesapeake Bay. We have the Choptank River and the Tuckahoe River. Um, and I just feel like it's home. I grew up in Delaware. I have family that's from Caroline County, but my career is not linear. I started off working with a weekly newspaper. I have a degree in journalism. I soon then started working in a family business that dealt with transportation. That
Mm.
led me to a state role with the Maryland Department of Transportation, which led me to a role with the Maryland Department of Commerce, and then eventually, most recently, with Caroline County as Economic Development Director. And
Oh,
that's where I
interesting.
felt at home. That's where
Mhm.
I saw it was different than working with the Maryland Department of Commerce, um, and economic development, what that meant for Caroline County. So I'll give a small example of what kind of really opened my eyes and where that led me to eventually purchase the Caroline Review. I worked with a very, very small town. I have 120 people, um, that thought that economic development for them was getting a convenience store.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
not, 1 or 2 jobs, really bringing in more of a traffic influence than, solving an issue, but for them, that really opened my eyes as to the scale of what we were looking at for the smaller rural areas on the Eastern Shore, not just Caroline County, but in particular Caroline County, and then you put that up against the town of Federalsburg, which was bringing in about 2,200 jobs with large manufacturers, distribution companies. And so that was more traditional economic development. So I loved my time with Caroline County and working towards managing both. How
Right.
can we have the small towns, some of which seem to be dying because of that lack of economic development, and then the larger industrial base where, how can they get jobs? Um, so I decided in 2023 that I was ready to just add another lane to my career path. And I actually, when I left the county, I did so as a consultant for
Mhm.
economic development and strategic planning. But the Caroline Review was just part of what the work I did in Caroline County. It had been around at that point for 40 years. It was family owned. It reminded me so much of my early start in the newspaper business.
Mhm.
And I just loved it. And I thought it's a publication that's still being printed, really shouldn't exist in 2020, 2023, but it did because the community relied on it. The community loved it. So I thought, okay, this is an opportunity for me to have, if I take that on, and I've been talking to the owners for a couple years, if I take that on, it's a couple hours a week. I could,
How sweetly naive of you. But we all, if you knew what you were getting into, you knew would never do half the things that you do.
that is absolutely correct. Um, and, and so I bought it
Mm.
with that naivete. But then I found quickly that it was something that I could, again, elevate by taking a risk and bringing on freelance staff, which the
Mhm.
previous owners didn't do because they felt they couldn't afford it. But
Right.
I had that support of, you know, uh, 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 the consulting work, which I was still doing.
Right.
And then it just it just blossomed. And when I saw that the need for that news, the weekly news, um, I committed myself to do this. And I given myself a time frame
Mhm.
to say, okay, it's working where it's not working, and I'm still in the middle of that 5-year plan. But it's people in Caroline County, whether they were born and raised or they have come as retirees or later in life career. They just love it. It feels like it's part of something that's connecting the whole community. So, yeah,
Well, and
that's
I
good.
love about Caroline County and some of the more rural places that, there is that sense of physical place, and
Yes.
people are really, you've grown up in the area and you have family connections there, and people want their small towns. People like might be nostalgic for small town living and not and forget that you don't have a convenience store, you don't have some of those things, but it's that sense of community that uh, people want to know what's happening in their world.
Yeah.
And so when you let's talk a little bit about sort of what you cover, because it sounds like the bread and butter of community meetings, schools, all the events. I mean, the 4-H banquet. As a former 4-H poultry judge in my youth, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
But, all those, like, I want to understand how, like, strategically, how you're knitting things together, because we also interview you also nominated one of your newest reporters for our Rookie of the Year award. So it was such a delight to talk to her and and realize that she had grown up in the community and that she feels like it's a way to give back. So I'm just kind of interested in how you are strategizing all that and pulling it together.
Yeah. So the building of the product, if you will, of the news really was the easier part.
Mm,
Um, because I had resources, with, Kennedy Thomason,
hmm
the person that you mentioned, another reporter that, is from the area, a photographer who just wants to be able to help. I understand though that at some point, wanting to be able to give back to the community does not pay the bills.
right.
So for me, it also
That's
does
the
not pay the
economic
bills.
development piece.
That's right. That's right. This is a business. And so setting my mind that this is a business, I have to make money at it. It has to be sustainable. I understand what that looks like. So I was fortunate that that content piece, elevating that content through the news, and we've been embraced by the community. So finding stories is not hard at all. Um, Now about 2 years in with the newspaper, digital newspaper, now the focus that I'm really focused on the business of it,
Hmm
and getting that advertiser because it's all free. It's still free. That's part of my mission is to ensure that it's freely accessible. So that advertising support. So it's been like building any business. I've got a great product. Now I'm going to bring in customers who are going to read it. And then I'm going to bring in the advertisers to say, here is this very niche, but very loyal group of people who are reading this newspaper weekly. Let's work and partner. And the businesses who are in the magazine, that's a natural lead. I've got,
Right.
I've got hundreds of leads right there. Um, they may or may not understand the difference yet. That's one thing about having a small town community legacy publication. They don't understand that we're doing the news yet. It's growing, but
hmm
I've got to do a lot of self promotion on that. But on that business side, it's advertising, but it's also, look, you are supporting something that, um, while not missing, because there has been reporting, I do want to acknowledge that you are part of a growing trend on delivering the news digitally throughout the country.
hmm
And Caroline County, which is usually 10 to 15 years behind everything else, because of what I'm doing, we're providing that we're at the forefront with digital only news. And so we've been able to get some advertisers and some sponsorships that see that that's an important part of being part of the community is because
hmm
your name is right there, right along CarolineReview.news.
And so, just economically, you've got digital advertising on the website itself, and then they can do sort of print style advertising in the printable
Yeah.
um, edition. I just
Yeah.
like to clarify so I understand. And then, how it seems like advertisers want to be here, and you also have the benefit of having the monthly magazine where people can then just add on. You talked about covering some of the banquets and events. Are you trying to do events yourself, or are you right? Because you might be capacity constrained to kind of get deeper in that way. But um, what other revenue streams are you looking at?
So it's funny you mentioned capacity straight. So, yeah, I the other part that I want to acknowledge are everybody who is working with me in a partnership, reporters, photographers, ad sales. We're all like, let's do it.
Hmm.
It has been wonderful. I have not come up against anybody who said I can't help you because I don't have time. Of course, I have a flexible workplace also.
Right.
So to that point, yes, we are looking at other revenue streams. I loved, I did a podcast when I was in economic development and I loved bringing the people to tell their stories. So it was very similar to this. And I do plan on starting a podcast. That's one place where it's kind of just, I keep putting that on the back burner, but we are going to do a speaker series.
Oh, that'll be great.
And it's called Conversations with Success. So, it's going to be a broad base of folks. And our first one is in May. Um, and it's a local, consultant who worked for a lot of nonprofits, worked in government, and then started her consulting business. It's new owners or the new owners of a new brewery, our first
Oh, great.
brewery in Caroline County. It's someone who's been in business with a hair salon for 20 years. So having survived COVID and
Yeah.
everything else and still being doing business, these are people's neighbors. So they're going to be able to come in, the folks that are going to get a ticket. They're going to be able to see the new brewery. We'll have some nibblies. They can buy the drinks. They're going to hear from their neighbors and people who they may think of, oh, they are so successful. I bet they were lucky. Well, I can tell you one of the people is going to say, no, it's not luck. It is work. It is grit. And that's what it's
Right.
called, small business, big grit. And so that is something I'm proud that Caroline Review, the brand, is going to be able to bring. So we can touch on nonprofits
Mhm.
in the county, school system, that anybody who's having success in what they're doing. So yeah, that's one way that we're looking more immediately for increasing our revenue.
I love that. And I think it's also, those are really positive, inspirational stories. And sometimes, when you're in a county that is one of the poorest in Maryland and has a lot of challenges, it can feel very, debilitating. It can be like, "Well, I have to move to another place, or I don't get to celebrate where I am." And so I love that you are really raising up people and sharing that inspirational
Thank
story
you.
and, getting people out to businesses and connecting with their community.
Oh, thank you.
So I I was wondering also, and I feel like I want you to elaborate on what the lessons of economic development. What are you bringing from your previous lives? You talked about your career path not necessarily being linear, and I don't think anybody's is linear. But it makes sense when you look back to say, okay, I'm doing the thing that I'm doing now, and here is how it all fits together. So, in your previous lives, what are you bringing forward? What lessons? What ideas are you bringing forward from your previous lives into this one?
It's trusting myself. It
Mm,
is really trusting my gut. Um, I am someone who, um, all of my life, even when I was in high school, I was somebody who thought differently than most people. And that is strategy thinking. It's thinking, I like to use thinking around the corner, which
mm,
references actually something that Stephen King wrote. But it's thinking around the corner, and my mind just does that anyway. And so, in the confines of government, both at the state level and at the county level, that's not something that's celebrated. And so
mhm,
I felt like I was kind of bumping my head up against that. Um, so being able to say, I don't care if this is the way that everybody else has done it. this is what works for Caroline Review. This is what works for my freelance partners. This is what works for me. And taking that step and saying, yep, okay, let's do it. And I want to say, Rebecca, in the last 2 years since I bought the Caroline Review, that has worked 98% of the time. But I'm also not fearful. And
Mhm.
that's my experience of that 2%, because that 2% is a lesson to be learned.
Right? It
That
gets you
2%.
closer to it's not a failure, it's a, like, shifting.
Exactly. That is exactly right. It could be the biggest failure, which for me would be a loss of, loss of ability to do the work, but then also loss of income.
Mhm.
Um, but which is most people, but I'm not afraid of that 2% anymore. That 2%, it's like, go ahead, bring it. I want to push those boundaries. So I would say that in my time of working at a weekly newspaper 40 some years ago, working in a family business and understanding that dynamic, and learning about transportation, which is a unique industry, than working for government, all of those things brought me to where I am now, which is that trusting my gut, which may be outside of the norms, not being afraid of failure, and just being really excited and celebrating the wins. One of the things I loved about football, I was a late appreciator of football, professional football. I was in my 30s when I finally learned to love the game. I loved how everybody celebrated doing their job. Really, if you look at professional sports, they celebrate doing their job. We say it's celebrating a win, but if you're a receiver and you catch the football and you run, you're doing your job.
That is their job, you're right, I never really thought of it that way.
So, I have learned to celebrate doing your job. And I share that with the team all the time. And we get a magazine out. Yes. It's expected, of course, but we did it. We did it. We made some improvements on distribution. Yes, we did it. And so whether it's a woohoo cocktail at the end of the day or it's just a silent high five to myself, that's the last piece of that puzzle, that I'm giving myself grace to recognize and to accept, and not, again, that 2%. There might be a little bit of a 2% in that week's win, but psh, that's next week's problem to solve. I'm going to go ahead and solve.
It's like you review
Celebrate.
game tape, and then you're like, "Okay, when we go back out and do it again next week,
That's
this
right.
is how we're gonna optimize it."
Yes.
I I wanted, like, how did you get over being scared around that 2%? Because that doesn't feel, I know you always had an ability to kind of look around that corner and sort of see opportunities where maybe obstacles were preventing you, but did you have strategies for getting over that fear of failure, or have you always just said, "I'm gonna just leave it out there"?
No, actually, I was quite fearful. I would be in a different spot if I wasn't so fearful in my 20s and 30s. My
Mm,
career would have been different, but that fear held me back. And so I think it's just a boldness of coming of maturity, of
got a
having
little bit
so
more
many
seasoned?
different,
Mhm.
yeah, having so many different experiences. Um, my the things that are fearful for me are a lot of personality base. What's
Mm,
somebody gonna think? Am I right? That checking out with somebody else, that phantom person, are they going to think that I'm doing the right thing? When I left a pretty good, solid salary job with benefits and great things and all, and decided to leave. I mean, I wasn't pushed out. I just
mhm.
was ready because this door was opening for me. I just didn't realize it yet. I thought, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And the worst would have been significant. I just bought a new house.
Mhm.
I just opened another business. I'm a business owner with a family member. So there was great risk, but I thought, all right, check off the things that are the worst that could happen. If you lose your home, you have family, you're safe and secure. Um, you may not be able to get DoorDash. Okay, you know what? That is not
Probably
the
for the
like,
best.
yeah, yeah. That that was so, when it really gave me a chance, you used the term season, it really gave me a chance to go, "No, this is a good later season in my life. It's time to declutter." And it's
Mhm,
time to declutter with a lot of the, things that I had been thinking were necessary. And I love to use food delivery as a example because when we moved into our new home, we were we had then capability of everybody and their brother bringing us food. I thought I was the queen. It's like, oh my goodness, you mean I don't have to get change my pajamas and go out? So,
you were
which is
living the
silly,
dream.
but to me, there are a lot of things I've defined as success, but I know now that I can survive and thrive, and that's what's happening. So it was really just a intentional mind reset based on all the experiences I've had and knowing that I wasn't answering to anybody else.
Mhm,
I was it. Being an entrepreneurial, I wish I had known that again several ch- um, careers ago that I was really built to be an entrepreneur because I trust myself. And if I'm not afraid of myself, then yeah, I'm doing great things.
well, it sounds like you have learned to take calculated risks and,
Oh,
y you're speaking to my heart because I self-soothe with contingency plans like, "Okay, I'm nervous about doing whatever it might be. What's the worst that can happen? How would I deal with the situation if this happened, if that happened?" And you realize, okay, like, the worst that can happen sort of like when you're the waitress in the Wayback Machine and you're terrified of dropping the tray of drinks, but you're going to sooner or later. And once you do, you realize, okay, like you just pick it up and you move back on. Like the world doesn't stop turning.
right.
But that's a really hard lesson to learn. And that fear, I think, does sometimes hold people back. So I'm glad you're breaking through that. And I now want to know, what do you think the next best move for Caroline Review is going to be? It sounds like you've gotten all of your puzzle pieces kind of in place. You've got a great team that's committed. You have your delivery pipelines in some ways. So what's next? What would you like to see in because you're what, 2 years into that 5-year plan, 3 years
Yeah.
into it now?
Yeah.
So tell us what you'd like to see.
So sustainability. Right.
Mhm,
So I have been, as I mentioned before, I've been relying on folks who are part of this team who love the team, but I don't have a bench. And
mm,
so I need a bench of talent. And I need again, that the revenue and
yeah,
looking for those revenue streams. I'm very interested in legislation that's before the General Assembly now to see where that goes for opportunities for Caroline Review News to take a growth path and
mhm.
be able to work as a digital only publication. And if that doesn't work out, then then hitting those advertisers more, talking to them, and finding out where we can get that support from the business community out there for the digital news. I have bought another publication, another
Oh, tell us.
another yeah, just started the process this week. So it's another printed monthly publication. It serves a greater area on the Eastern Shore. It's a 5 county publication. So,
Oh, terrific.
yeah, super excited about that. So that, bringing all of those together, um, is also going to help with, taking a little bit of that publication's revenue and making some investment into the news, taking some of Caroline Review and making that investment into the new publication. Um, so yeah, that's where I am now.
So will you I'm always interested when people add to kind of their stable of publications, like, do you see it kind of merging, or are you thinking that because you have a larger publication that could cover 5 jurisdictions, do you keep them separate and kind of back end? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, so it is also a legacy publication. It's been around for over 40 years. So they're separate. They're completely
Mhm.
separate. The Caroline Review magazine and I'm not quite ready to say the name. So it's because
We'll have you back on when you're ready. Don't you fret.
okay. So yeah, they're two separate audiences, two separate content profiles. So yeah, and that's what it's exciting. It's not, I did not go looking for it. I didn't go
Mhm.
looking for it, but something I'm proud of is that, I've been able to bring attention to Caroline County, I think from other news organizations who were covering it anyway, but now they're seeing that there's this other layer of opportunity for news. And
Mhm.
so we're getting a lot more attention. We're getting some attention from broadcast. We're getting attention
Great.
from digital only. So, that's exciting. So I think that knowing that I did that and this opportunity came to me for the second publication, I wasn't planning on it. So, I'm going to make it work because I have to. And so this time next year, I'll have a new best move, I hope,
I
and
can't wait.
maybe talking about expanding further. I've had people ask me in Delaware if I would start a publication there, but I actually don't know Delaware, the smaller towns, as well as I do Caroline County. So, yeah.
Well, and you start with what you know and then you work out from there. It sounds like you have a great strategy and you are like, this is what you're meant to do. I do feel like wherever you find yourself, everything that you've done is sort of
Yeah,
built to that moment for better
exactly.
or worse. So I'm really excited to hear more about the Caroline Review. I can't wait to hear what you do next.
Thank you.
So we'll have you back when that's more finalized. And congratulations on your best move
Thank
of
you.
2025.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Rebecca.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.